Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and we are at the 25th of August, 2024. It is a Sunday and it's actually going to be an extraordinarily busy day for me today, very unusually so. Sunday is one of my days that I take clients and I take appointments, but I'm also beginning my psychic development class starting at 4 p.m. this evening. And that class will begin today's the first day of it. I have all the material together for it and the things that I'm going to talk about with the group. And I've also got 2 Rahani sessions today. I've got one at noon that's virtual, and then I have one at 1:30 that's in person. And she knows that I'm starting a class at 4, so she'll probably come in and do that, and I'm sure she'll be leaving by probably in the 3 o'clock hour, and then that way I can set up for the live stream at 4. So, not the live stream, the class. That's the thing, like last few days, I actually do have some kind of a sinus infection, I guess you could say. And so my head is just, it's so funny, I taught Reiki 2 yesterday, obviously to 2 students I'd already had for Reiki 1. And I kept I think there was one thing they were talking about animals and plants, and I turned that into ants. I was like my words have just been really stupid lately, which can happen to me when I have this kind of stuff. I think it's a sinus infection because it's all kind of up in this section, and it's not like the typical headaches that I was getting, the other kinds of migraines. So, and everything just kind of feels very dry, but and it's not, and when you brush your teeth, it's like blood comes out and everything, because it's like everything is just under here. And so, some people would be like, oh, well, go take an antibiotic or go to the doctor. And I'm like, well, no, because antibiotics actually, I remember I was told years ago that by actually somebody who was a really good doctor, he said, the capillaries in here are so small that you take 2 weeks of an antibiotic. He said it really, unless you've got a really serious infection, and I've had those before too. If you have a really serious infection, then you do need the antibiotics. But for most of the time, he says just decongesting. So I don't know, probably got to do steam and some stuff like that just to try to. I don't feel congested. It just everything just feels like it's on fire, like it's dry, and so. Yeah, so I don't know. So that's going to take some time to work out. The timing of it is just great because I'm so busy, and I've got to get this Kickstarter video that I'm trying to put together. Plus, I still have 6 videos to record because I had class yesterday, and because this has been making me feel kind of run down, I've not been able to do that. So I'm going to see if I can get 3 videos in today. I've got to do some modicum of house cleaning before people come over. Oh, good morning, Joanne. And I saw that you posted me a second message. I will check that out in a little bit. I was just talking about my wonderful, the fact that I have a bit of a sinus infection right now, and so my words are really backwards. I kept referring to Reiki symbols as runes. I'm like, why am I doing that? And they were just laughing. And Corinna was sitting in on this part of the class. She's probably like, oh my God. But we got through all the Reiki symbols, and we got them to do practice of the Reiki symbols and all that. And then we did the Reiki 2 attunements, which are the hardest ones out of the 3, believe it or not. So your joints and body were so bad yesterday. Yeah, I don't know. It could be that sudden change in weather, because certainly where we are, you're north of me, but certainly where we are, it's been, we went from being hot, sticky, and humid to being cold. It's going to be hot and humid, by the way, beginning in middle of next week again. I saw that it was going to be 91. I was like, glad I didn't take any air conditioners out. But today has been, I really enjoy nights that get down to 50 degrees, which is people in the UK, that's 9 degrees. I was like, yeah, that would be the thing. But I think that's just it. Yeah, I know, great. But the fact that it's these sudden changes in weather, and the fact that to me, that's a sign that fall is coming in, because there's different kinds of molds and things that appear as things start to go into decay. And good morning, Sam. I'm just talking about my sinus infection in the context of everything else I'm trying to do right now. Like I said, trying to get this Kickstarter video together because I need to do it properly. But I had Reiki 2 yesterday where my words were all backwards, and Karina kept asking me questions that I was just like, they're not things I had the answers to off the top of my head, because there's a lot about some of the background of Reiki that's it was never really emphasized when I learned it, because it was there. I mean, certainly people could research it and read into it. And if people were mastering, then maybe they would look more deeply into it. But when it comes to Reiki 2, memorizing the Reiki symbols is really enough. I mean, that to me is the big thing, and getting that incorporated into the Reiki routine. And I think the students I had liked this better, and they said they liked the fact that they had worked together before because it gave them a context for how Reiki 1 felt different from Reiki 2. So it was a good class. It was a successful class, but I just have this thing that's just in the whole back of my head. I did take some Advil this morning because that does seem to help. That's what tells me it's not one of my standard headaches. It's something, and like I said, you brush your teeth and you're just spitting out tons and tons of blood. So I was like, okay, yeah, the sinuses are all messed up. And that sounds alarming, but that's not the first time it's happened. So I had plastic surgery when I was 16, like in 1988. So, and really I refer to 80s surgeries and probably earlier as butchery, because any surgery I had to have, even like 1991 I had a surgery, when I had breast tumor, and all of them were butchery. It was just like, now they would do those surgeries, there would be so little scar tissue, they do it in ways that are, the techniques are much more advanced. I think I'm just kind of loaded up with scar tissue in here from the surgery that I had back in 1988. And, so I think that's what some of these complications are from, but I'm also well aware that any subsequent surgeries to try to deal with that can create additional problems. They have a 50-50 shot of doing anything for you. So I'm like, I'll just live with it. This is what it is. But anyway. So today, as I mentioned at the beginning, for people who are joining a little later, I've got 2 Rahani sessions today, 1 online, 1 in person, and I've got the intuitive development class tonight, which, Joanne, I know that's what you were messaging me about before. Right now we have a group of 4. One of them is in the UK, so I don't know how long she's going to be on. I was like, surprised to see that she had registered for it. So we will see, but certainly there's a group of at least 3, and I think to the people who have been joining like the Dream workshops and the Chiron workshops, we have at least 1 new person coming in for that. So so it'll be good. And I'm also thinking about doing another Dream workshop. I know that the group that did the original one in June kind of said it would be nice to have like a monthly meetup for people who want to discuss dreams. And of course, anybody who's new who wants to just come in and discuss their dreams too is perfectly fine. I talked about some weird dreams that I had yesterday, but I won't go into that again. You can watch yesterday's live stream where I mentioned it, and but I think that would be an interesting one for the group to to tackle. So I'm going to try to do that. Tomorrow I have Jenny Gennaro-Sam, who I work with, and she sometimes comes on here. She's also a Reiki practitioner. She does, and I don't know what she's offering right now, but I know she does what they call Sarakali healing, and she also does magnified healing. She's also done some shamanic stuff. Like she's another one. She's one of those people I always felt was very interesting, that both of us came out of the higher ed technology area, and both of us, this is what both of us do for a living now. It's kind of funny. But Jenny wants to do a group thing with Melissa, who hasn't been on in a while. I know she's been very busy with things. She used to be on this morning live stream every morning, but she did email us and say, I've got a ton going on right now, and it's completely understandable. But she may actually join us for that one as well, because she also deals in certain healing modalities, and I actually taught her Reiki 1 and 2. So we will see what that ends up being. But anyway, Jenny and I are going to try to get our presentations together tomorrow. So she's going to come over, and then I know I have the Katonia live stream in addition to this one, which is probably going to get pushed to 3 o'clock. And like I said, I've got 6 readings I need to do for the channel. Those are going to be late because I might get 3 done today, but I'm going to have to do the rest of them at some point tomorrow. And today's my day usually for cleaning the house. So, it doesn't look horrible, but when I have, especially if I'm going to have clients in the house. I want, the bathrooms have to be clean, the kitchen has to be, everything has to be clean. And I don't generally have a lot of dust around, but I want everything to be clean before I have clients in my house. It's just, I don't want to, not that it's filthy, but I just want, I want things cleaned up to the minute before they come in. So, anyway, so yeah, it's going to be an insanely busy next couple of days. So Tuesday, I'm probably just going to crash out all day. That's usually the day my sister and I go walking, and usually it's D&D afternoon on Tuesdays with my group of my friends from the UK. So we'll see. Again, we've been I think we put it off last week because somebody couldn't make it. So we'll see what happens this week. Anyway, so yeah, busy week shaping up here towards the end of the month. I'm with you, and I have a realtor coming. Oh gosh, wow. So yeah, and then you can just kind of like, gotta hurry up and try to make everything look nice. But so anyway, the topic I was gonna discuss today, what came into my mind this morning, it's something actually that was the live stream that I did when I talked about creativity and inspiration. Sudha was on that live stream, and she had mentioned her daughter being in her first grade class, and that when she was in art class, they gave her a piece of like white paper, and it was like they had to kind of fill in or color in. And she said, and she made the comment of, if I put in all of this, why do I have to color all this space in? I feel like I can't breathe. Which I was like, which to me is like, that's an incredibly profound statement. Yes, loved it. And so really this is kind of what this is kind of a thought about the idea of empty space. Okay, because that's the thing that came into my mind, was that it popped into my mind again. And to me also, that's, if she's a first grader, then she's probably about, what was first grade, like 7 years old, 8 years old, somewhere around there. That is still an age where everything about the educational system and everything about our rationality hasn't completely taken over. So children are really excellent at being able to connect the images. That's a good example of how children think. And it's a way that we really, ideally, as adults, would be able to retain that way of thinking. Because it's basically they're basically able to see the external world as a reference to the internal. Okay, and there's not the same differentiation that we create as we get older and we get into educational systems and we start being analytical and dissecting and then going between, this is real and this is not real and this is, and I mean, yeah, you need a certain amount of that to navigate society, but we often do it to the exclusion that anything on the lines there is suspect and should be discarded, or it's childish, or it's irrational, or what have you. But oftentimes there's a certain clarity in that. And the thing that I was interested in with regard to empty space was the idea that, okay, people view empty space in two different ways. All right, and I know I've talked a little bit about this when I've talked about no-thingness. Okay, and I talk about that in the context of transition. The idea that when you're transitioning from one space to another, that there's this, that we are in this gap and we can't see our way forward. Okay, so we talk about empty space, and sometimes what we try to do is fill it in with the past. You try to fill it in with the familiar. You go back to, I don't know what to do in this space, so I'm just going to do the thing I've always done. And that's a natural thing. That's a natural thing we do. It's not, to me, I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm just saying that is a challenge that we tend to have when we really need to leave a space empty. It's not something we're good at doing. Think about practice of meditation. A lot of people don't want to do meditative practice, or they get frustrated by it very easily, because when you're meditating, there's this idea that your mind has to be empty, or at least what you're moving towards is an emptiness of mind. And people say, well, I can't empty my mind. Okay? Now, your mind is actually that is the space that functions best when it's emptiest. And and again, that can also lead to ideas of thinking about, oh, well, people who are empty-headed, so to speak, or the idea that somebody, like there's almost a kind of stupidity by not having by having a emptied mind. But an emptied mind and emptied head are two different things. An empty head might be somebody who just doesn't have the skills or the knowledge or whatever to work through something rationally. But to have an empty mind is to say, okay, our way of doing things causally, the way in which we interpret the core narrative of a lot of people in this culture has to do with causality. The past influences the future. When I have an experience like this, the next time I have an experience of this, it's going to be to some degree a repeat of that past experience. Okay, so we think of everything as a repetition. We think that we're this is what I did this time. Do you ever have that with somebody? You'll say, oh, okay, yeah, if you want to do this thing, these are the 5 steps that are going to take. These are the things that are going to happen. We look at things in terms of cause and effect. If something happens to us or something, and I think about this particularly with regard to anomalous phenomenon, which is something I talk a little bit about and I talk a little bit about in this class. When something is anomalous and we don't know where to put it, we tend to look at it in one of 2 different ways. We either say, oh, okay, we either dismiss it and assume that we are delusional. Oh, I must have seen that the wrong way. My eyes must be playing tricks on me. It must not be this, it must not be that. And I mean, that could be true sometimes. Okay, sometimes we do think there's something, I forget what happened the other day. I had some kind of a scent in my room from nowhere, and I was like, where did this scent come from? And that's when I realized I had used Flonase, which is a steroid to open up. And that is actually the scent and the taste of Flonase. I was like, that's what it is, So, good morning. So I have this, so sometimes we have to, when you see things, see like these ghost hunter shows and stuff where the whole premise is just, okay, we want to look at things, we want to measure things and look at them as rationally as possible and try to debunk. That's the phrase they use, debunk. This thing that appears to be anomalous, is there a rational explanation for it? Like that's the first thing that people will go to. And so when they do that, it's so yeah. And again, I think that's actually kind of a good. That's actually not a good, that's actually not a bad way to deal with things like that, because I think you want to make sure, and again, there's a difference too between synchronicity and what's truly an anomalous event. I mean, it could be anomalous for you. You could be like, okay, I've seen that word in 3 different places now, and it's a weird word that I never see, and ooh, what does that mean to me? I mean, that's more like a synchronicity. When you're talking about an anomalous event, it's something that literally seems to defy the laws of physics or the laws of expectation and things like that. So, or it's just literally like, okay, that shouldn't happen. That's what I mean when I talk about something that's anomalous. And the reality is there could be a trick of the eye where there's a rational explanation, but there might not be. So, and to me, I have always in my lifetime focused on the anomalies. I'm always been interested in that because the anomalies are like those cracks where our kind of facade of order and our facade of cause and effect starts to break down. And to me, I always kind of look at that as a starting point for validation of the fact that you don't always have to live in the past to deal with the future, because that's the way we deal with a lot of things. We feel, so if we don't have an experience of something to relate to, we can fill that empty space with a lot of other stuff. You can fill it with possibility and you can fill it with fear. Okay? And again, a lot of it may depend on where you are. If you've had a lot of trauma, if you've had a lot of upheaval, you may just be like, it's kind of like that Radiohead song, no alarms and no surprises, please. Like, can we not do any more of this because this is just, it's just too much. But I think that's the whole thing about it. So when we're talking about meditation, when we talk about meditation as being that emptying of space, when you a good meditation is one in which there's a certain focusing of the mind. It's usually good to have some kind of visual cue, because our minds are not completely blank. our rationality dominates so much that we're thinking all the time. Think about if you sit down to meditate and you say, okay, I'm just going to kind of quiet the mind. So what happens? You start thinking about this, and then about that, and then, oh, this is what I had to done yesterday, and this is the thing that happened yesterday, and this is this person, and oh, and I have this to do today, and I have that, and we kind of get, by the time our meditation time is over, we realize our whole mind has just been going crazy with all of this. The other thing that you can do is what Alan Watts would call like watching the watcher. Like, who's watching the watcher? If you sit there and the minute you sit there and if you have a moment of silence and you go, oh, look, my mind is blank. Well, now your mind's not blank anymore, right? You've just filled in the space with a thought about the blankness of your mind. So, and that's where people can get very frustrated too. So the best meditations that I've encountered have been ones where you stare at, like, I have white walls in my house. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff on my walls too, but if I look at a particular spot in the wall, and you use that almost as a projection screen. So what you do is you watch your thoughts just kind of go by. And generally this is something, the way that I do is like maybe 2 minutes of that. Not, sometimes people might be able to do it for longer, but I would say at least 2 minutes. Just kind of watch the spot, and as your thoughts, you have to kind of almost see your thoughts as being on a wheel. So as a thought comes in, it's kind of like it's here, it's in front of you, and then it kind of passes out of view. And or the way you might watch clouds go by. You just kind of watch things just go by. And initially, it's going to be, you're going to find that the thoughts overtake that. You say, my Tai Chi instructor had us do standing meditation like that. He does it at long doses though. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, you can do that. You may have instructors, and yeah, you can try to do it while standing. There's different ways you can do it. I think for some people that would be very, very daunting because they're like, I don't want to stand here for 30 minutes or an hour. I mean, you get restless. You want to start. To me, I always feel like I always advise people who are starting out to start in small doses. Start with trying to do it for a minute. Try to do it for 2 minutes. Because eventually what happens is you get to a point where you are, you're still going to have thoughts, but the idea is you don't get attached to the thought. The thought just kind of flies by, like something flying in front of you, but you're not sitting there attached in the thought. It's not, your body's not encompassed by the thought. And that takes some practice. It takes some time to do that. And the benefit of a practice like that, well, understanding that there's no goal to meditation per se, the benefit of that kind of a practice is that you can take a distance from the mind. It gives you empty space. It gives you space to work in, space to breathe. It gives you space to stand back. And when you have that space, that's how we started, 3 minutes, then worked up to 30. I felt great. And that's just it. Start small and work your way up. And if you can do 30 minutes a day, that's awesome. Or 30 minutes on a regular schedule of some kind. But the thing is, some people I am meditation, and that is basically a 35-minute meditation. And I can't tell you what the steps are to it because I'm not allowed to. It has to be taught by the guru, or really by the people who have been taught by the guru and who are authorized to teach it. And the concern is very simple. They don't want you to miss a step or forget something, and then it becomes like a game of telephone where things gradually break down, and then the meditation that you're teaching is not the original one at all. So people do have to have the manual. They have to be authorized. And at the time when they were giving out authorizations a little more freely, I did not get authorized to do it. It was just an additional thing that I wasn't going to be able to do. So now I think they've kind of centralized it, and the ashram in California seems to be the ones once a week. We did every day once a week you did the 30-minute every day. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, actually. That seems like that's a lot more reasonable. But for me, that sometimes I find I can't do the IM 35 if I've got a headache, it's very hard, or if I'm having some kind of a thing because the pain is too much to be able to do it for me. Or I find that if I've got a zillion things going on, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but I know that if I make the space for it, it benefits my entire day because it literally changes the whole focus of my entire day. And I am very much able to be more in the center in everything that I do. So it is a worthwhile time investment. But that said, I sometimes do have physical things that end up making me say, okay, yeah, I can't. If I wake up with one of my headaches, I'm like, okay, I can't do this today. But anyway, so yeah, so that's the one thing about empty space. The other thing about empty space, especially since I'm talking about an intuitive development class that I'm doing tonight, is that empty space is where intuition, instinct, where all those other ways of knowing are able to come in. If your mind is crammed all the time with stuff, then you can't ever hear yourself. It's like being like, in a concert, like right next to the speakers and trying to talk to your friend. It's like, what? You're like yelling at each other or, trying to, read lips and do things. It's like, you can't, you have to get rid of the noise. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of all noise. The most effective practitioner of meditation is the one who can do it in the middle of noise, who can shut the noise out, right? But shutting the noise out is not, but that's not something, again, and people who can't do it, I used to, occasionally, I forget where I was I in California? I can't remember where I was, but I remember this guy who was, maybe it was even in England, where I was probably getting my nails done or something, and I could hear one of the guys who was doing doing this woman's nails or whatever. I don't know if he was trying to flirt with her or whatever, but he was just kind of like, oh, I can sit in complete silence for like an hour. And I'm like, dude, first of all, I don't believe you. Second of all, if you're going to sit around, when people sit around bragging like that, they kind of get into this whole thing of like, I'm very advanced at meditation. I'm much more advanced at all these practices than you are. And I'm like, yeah. And as soon as I hear that, again, A, I don't believe you, and B, you've missed the point of all of those practices. It's not for you to walk around and say, this is not a competition as to who can do it longer. It's just, and I really feel like it's almost meant to either indicate that somebody is somehow superior in that, or that it really ends up becoming a discouragement to people who can't. A lion doesn't just brag, a lion just is, right? But I find that there's some people who get put off meditations and meditation groups because of that kind of a thing, and it's just like, no, this isn't like a let's see who can do it the longest. It's not a game like that. So so as long as you can have, I remember Amma has said, she said, if you can maintain one pointed meditation for 10 seconds, she says it affects the entire world. Okay? Because that's how difficult it is to have that kind of emptiness, to have that kind of silence. And a lot of times we fear the concept of empty because we think that means losing everything that we care about. And this is where emptiness becomes connected to the fear of loss. The other thing about empty space is that sometimes people don't like it because anything that perhaps has been in shadow, the things that perhaps people have not dealt with or not worked on in their life, or the things that trouble them, there's this sort of energy of, well, I'm going to, I've had this terrible thing happen, but I'm just going to push on. Okay, I'm not going to let that affect me. I'm just going to push on. The problem is that it does affect you. It does affect you. It does at some point. It's understood that in certain situations, if you're in a crisis, and let's just say you're a parent in crisis, and you got to, be there for your children to be kind of a rock of stability or something, okay? Something like that. Yes, it's understood why people will say, okay, you know what? I have to put myself aside for the moment and just try to be the stable, grounded person. It's understood why people do that. But at some point, that needs to be dealt with. And sometimes this tendency towards needing to be busy all the time, okay? Some of us are busy. I mean, to me, I do like being busy, and I do like, especially when I'm doing the work that I enjoy doing. Although I do want days off. I'm sorry, I'm like, my battery gets drained, and I'm like, yeah, I just need a day to just, sit around, enjoy myself, go for a walk, listen to music, call friends to talk about nothing. I need, or just a space to just sleep in late, just to be, whatever it is. It's not like I necessarily have to be doing anything. That's the other thing too. We're very, very much productivity oriented. So if we have this idea that taking a time out and taking a moment to not do and just to be, that somehow that's equated with being shiftless or being lazy. It's like, come on, you gotta move, you got something you gotta do. Especially if maybe there's something going on where you feel like it needs to be addressed. If you run a business and you think, oh, well, if I slow down, I'm not going to make any money. Well, I mean, yeah, you have to put the work in to make the money. I mean, that is how it goes. But that doesn't mean you have to go like a machine on all the time, and that you should never have a break. There's some people who just never know how to take a break. It's the same people who always feel like they have to fill everything with chatter, or that they can't go any place by themselves. You know, the idea that you would go out for a walk in the woods or something by yourself. It's just like, and again, I'm going to say especially women, because that just only seems to be the thing. Like I travel. When I travel alone, people say, well, how can you travel by yourself? And nobody asks a man that question. They ask, how can you travel by yourself? I'm like, very simple. I buy a plane ticket, I get on a plane, I book a place to stay, and I go there. You know, it's like, it's not, I just do it. But some people think that, that's, there's some people who fear, as we talked about aloneness, and we talked about aloneness versus loneliness, right? Being alone, not having something to do, and not necessarily having something to think about. Just to have a space to allow things to come in. If you don't hold space, that's a concept that you hear about a lot, is holding space. If you don't hold space for things to come in, you don't have an inspiration. If you're busying yourself all the time and you don't allow yourself that break, especially if you're in a very, very stressed kind of a thing. If we're talking, 9 and 10 of wands kind of energy, where you're like, oh my God, I'm carrying all these burdens. And again, some people, that's like a mark of honor. Look at all these burdens that I'm carrying. Look at all the stuff I'm doing. That shows that I'm a productive member of society. And maybe they are. But is it good for you? Is it good for the soul to be doing that? And more importantly, the question becomes, are you doing that because there's just other stuff you want to push out of the way? It's like the stuff you put in the back of the closet because this is the kind of stuff you need in front of you right now. Because eventually, at some point, things do slow down. Life does change. That's when we have those Uranus moments, those tower moments, where things come in. Where you just have all of this stuff that happens to you, and when it happens, literally, you could have a whole day full of plans. You could have everything all planned out. You could have, I've got this going, and this going, and it literally just levels all of it. You would hope that it's not going to be something like all of a sudden there's an illness that could hospitalize somebody, or there could be something else that can go on that can just suddenly stop you dead in your tracks. And that's why it's always better to be breathable and flexible than say, I can only do it this way. And there's no deviating from this. I must do it this way. But you're not allowing space in to see whether or not there's another way. And the mind is the thing that always takes over. That's why you often see things like the 8 of Swords or the 9 of Swords, where it's just all of these swords coming in, which are your thoughts. And these thoughts keep you in despair. They keep you trapped. They keep you, and eventually in the end they betray you, because you have the 10 of Swords. You have that all, and they show the person with the swords in their back. It's your mind can be something that there's a benefit to allowing yourself that empty space. And allowing yourself that empty space does not, again, that it's think about it. It's just something that people are very, very uncomfortable with. I think I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to get into our reading in a minute. But my colleague Joanna had done something with with her honor students, and she did an exercise. She said, "Okay, I need you all to go home, and tonight I just want you to sit for 30 minutes, doing nothing, no phone." No TV, no conversation, just sit for 30 minutes and then write about it. And she said most of the students just blew off the assignment. They wouldn't do it. And then the ones that did said it was the most awful 30 minutes of their entire life. Because that goes to show you how uncomfortable people are with empty space, especially in an era where we have phones and where we have all this other, just internet, and we have 8 zillion distractions. we spend all of our time in the distractions, and the question is, how much time do you have to be quiet and to actually hear your own authentic voice or to create your own thing? There needs to be some empty space. But we live in a society that says leaving that empty space is a bad thing. It's suspect. You're being lazy. You're not being productive. And again, I'm not suggesting that this also means that people, it's like, people have obligations, right? I have to work. I have to make money. I have to do whatever it is that I have to do. Now, it might be very easy to say for somebody who has an inherited bank account or something like that, where it's just like, yeah, I can just sit back and do nothing. But we oftentimes put ourselves in situations where we are doing too much. Now, our reading today is interesting because our central card is We Are the World again, 10 of Pentacles, okay? So again, reminder here that we are part of community, that we are not, if we want to look at this idea of emptiness, it's the idea that we treat it like we're the only wave in the ocean, right? Like there's nothing else around me, there's just me. It's like, no, you're part of a bigger system. And that also gets to the idea when we feel like we have to take on a lot of things and fill that space. Sometimes what we don't often recognize is what other forces, what other support we have, whether they be people or something else. It's kind of the idea of whether or not someone gets in a boat and paddles very hard upstream, or whether or not they put the sail up and let the wind take them. Okay? They're both doing the same thing. You're both moving. It's just one goes with the flow of what's happening. The other tries to fight very hard to kind of to work against it. So again, leaving space for the universe to do its thing, letting that space fill in, understanding that there's more to this space than just you and your individual effort. Your individual effort's important, but sometimes the best things come from not working at all. If we follow the idea that life is a kind of play, then we don't really leave room for that. We don't. We feel that we have to be planned. We have to be on a trajectory. We have to be doing things in a certain way, and a lot of what we do is predicated on just what we did before. So we don't open ourselves up to the new. We don't open up ourselves to possibility. And when we may be forced into a position where we need to learn about the possible and the new, we're not able to do it. It's just like we don't know how to do anything but go back to what we did before. And oftentimes it takes time. It takes time to break out of a thing like that. But we have to be aware that that's what's going on. Now our inner feeling, here we go, turning in. Again, meditation, of what unaware, trying to quiet, not listening to these voices that are around the edge. Listening to, being able to get away from that noise. And the noise doesn't have to be from other people. That's the noise that's already in our head. Okay? These are the voices that are constantly talking to us. And the things that put us in contradiction. We may have an intuition about something, and then our mind goes, oh, but I don't know, what how do you know it's that? What is this? What is that? Like, it wants to see everything all the time. And sometimes, there's cases where trust is the thing you want to go with. You have a feeling about something, but it's also not something you need to hang on to and dissect. If you get an intuition about where something is going, you just want to follow it. You don't want to grab it and say, oh, okay, I have this intuition, so what's my plan for making this happen? Like, you don't have to do that. You just let things breathe, let them go. The external feeling of which we're aware, this is great, the stress card. Literally what I'm just talking about. You have the guy who's standing here, he's blowing a horn, he's juggling candles, lit candles, and he's standing on top of a balloon that a monkey is about to take a pin and go puncture it. Okay? And it's interesting that they choose a monkey here, because if we think about monkeys in terms of their connection to humans, the genetic connections and so forth, I think monkeys would have more to do with that more developing consciousness, more of that instinct, right? But this is us in the mind, right? This is us in all the mind and all the important things that I have to do and all the things I have to keep going at the same time. And then it's just kind of like, just comes in and now you're kind of back to, it's like, okay, just try to get back to that stage where you are not so much focused on the mind, where you allow space for these other senses to come in, because they don't come in through rational thinking, and we think that's bad. That's why we don't like things that are. I'm working on this presentation on energy healing. With energy healing, a lot of people go, I don't know how. I don't see the how of how this works. I need it to be broken down, and it's like it works through sound and it works through image. It's like you're almost kind of being put on a particular frequency through this method. And how do you show it? How do you explain it? You don't. What's it going to do? Is it going to cure this? Is it going to do that? We don't know. And people are not comfortable with that. They're like, no, I need to do this, and I need to know the definite outcome to this, because we want to make sure it's the control thing. We want to make sure our plans are doing that. Yielding, this is why I say when I talk about the feminine concept of yielding, okay, we talk about the feminine as being, at least in the Western conception or in the yin-yang conception, yin is passive, right? This is how passivity works. Sometimes passivity, you were talking about Tai Chi before, but if you actually do certain martial arts, and I've said this before too, sometimes the way in which you can get the better of your opponent is by yielding. Not by just going in forcefully all the time, but step back, and that person often ends up using their own force against them. There's an art to just relaxing and just letting the universe do its thing, but we don't trust it. Yeah, looking at life as an adventure, okay? And you have the adventure card here. Life is an adventure. I mean, we can look at it as a fearful thing that we constantly have to be guarding ourselves against, or we can look at it as an adventure. So those are two different conceptions of space, of that empty space in the mind. Some people see it as it's going to be filled with all the dark things I haven't dealt with. Other people are going to see it as a place where you can go out and look at things for the first time and maybe see new possibilities in it, because you're not looking at it with any kind of expectation. Okay? And our outcome here, we have the Two of Water here, Two of Cups, which is the friendliness card. Okay? So, yeah, it's about connection, and it's about establishing connection by yielding control. By yielding control. You're not the one who has to do everything by yourself. You're not necessarily trapped in a particular configuration. You are part of a system. And this is what I think the constant reminder is. You're part of a system, so you're not somebody who has to be, there is other help. And even if it's not help from other people, that's why I tell people, pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to synchronicities. This doesn't mean you have to be vigilantly looking around all the time. You just need to relax control. Sometimes I think we get to points in life where there's so much going on, and it becomes so almost absurd, especially when you have one absurd obstacle after another. And I've talked about stories like that, so I won't repeat them here, but you get to a point where you finally just start to laugh at it, and you're like, okay, there's literally nothing I can do at this point. And then when you get to that point, that's often the point where the solution presents itself, because you left an empty space. Okay? And this is interesting. I'm using the Between Worlds Oracle today as well, and our card is Kinfolk. Remember, I just had gotten the thing about, the Two of Cups, and I also had gotten the Ten of Pentacles. Now, the Kinfolk card means, in this one, friendship. It's literally the same one that I got, which I think is really interesting. This card calls forth family of all sorts: familial, chosen, ecological, and spiritual. Your closest relationships are a practice in mutual vulnerability, and your strength is multiplied in the affirming, healthy bonds you build with them. Can you see others as they are, and in turn allow them to see you? It's interesting. Empty space synchronicity. I just pulled Make Room for Miracles as your daily card. Yeah, there you go. Make room. Make room, I've been getting a lot about, what rune have I been getting a lot? Ingus. Ingus is about cleaning up, space, finishing things, finishing projects. We're seeing a lot about finishing. And if you think about it, now you're just talking, it's funny, Joanne, you're talking about calling a realtor in, but it's almost like when you move, it's like, what are you doing? You're emptying your space out. Time to empty space. physically perhaps for some people. And truthfully, if you have a very cluttered house and you've been saying, gosh, I've been meaning to clean this forever, sometimes actually making some time to do it, and again, some people, if you are a very busy person, you might just need to do it in small chunks, but making time to work on that, again, external and internal have a similarity. Working on clearing your external space can sometimes also help clear your internal space. Because when you look around you and you see that space, it can be a reflection of what's going on inside. If we have tons and tons of stuff around us, then sometimes we're amid all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, we need to clear out some of this stuff. That stuff can be thoughts, and that stuff can be physical stuff. So making that space, the energy also moves better. Well, yes, exactly. That's just it. If you think about putting something in a very confined space and something has to flow through it, it's like it doesn't flow through. The more open it is, the more open space there is, the more things have space to move around, the more possibilities there are for putting new stuff in, right? So anyway, just a little meditation on emptiness and space today. Like I said, those of you who can join me, I know, Joanne, we talked about the class, so hopefully you can join us next week. But intuitive development is tonight. I think I'm trying to think how long registration runs. I think I might have it open till like 10 o'clock this morning or something. If people still want to register 10 or 11, I'd have to look at what I have in Wix. But or people, if it's closed, they can message me and I can try to get them in. But yeah, we've got a small group tonight, and this is going to be a 10-week course that I'm going to be doing. And like I did mention earlier, I do have a busy afternoon because I've got 2 Rouhani sessions back to back, one virtual, one in person, and then and then we're going to be teaching the class. And speaking of empty space, I got to try to create some empty space for me this morning to do a few things before people come over. So anyway, I hope you all have a great Sunday. Oh, you're welcome. And I hope everybody has a wonderful week. And of course, I will be back. I should be back on tomorrow. I don't, I think if I'm going to crash and burn this week, I'll let you know. But I think I should be back on tomorrow to do one of these, and then we'll see what tomorrow's topic is. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.